Part 1. Loki Representation. In the year of our Lord Odin 2021, the Marvel Cinematic Universe released their new series Loki, starring everyone's favourite queer trickster god. Ever since 2011, when the internet realised Tom Hiddleston was sexy, the comic book version of Loki has gradually evolved from weird ugly mean dude to sexy suave genderqueer bisexual. The comic books made this explicit, especially the genderqueerness, canonising the idea that Loki wasn't really just a man. Both a male and a female version of them were authentic Lokis. Loki doesn't just turn into a woman as a disguise. Loki sometimes just is a woman. He was also just explicitly labelled as bi by writer Al Ewing. Fans had been hoping for years to see these elements of the character canonised in the Marvel Cinematic Universe films, with no such luck. But when the Disney Plus series Loki was announced, we all had our fingers and toes crossed. And did they deliver? Did they ever? Let's take a look at Loki's epic, earth-shattering coming out scene, the queerest superhero moment in all of MCU history. Parents, cover your children's eyes because they're going full on gay. They're going to be traumatized by this one. It's going to turn your kids gay.
Must have been would-be princesses, or perhaps another prince.
A bit of both.
And that's it. I know that doesn't seem like much, but if you play it backwards at 50% speed, he's actually saying, I pineapple super gay. And it was exciting. I've been into Marvel since I was a little kid, way before any of the films came out, and I was really happy to see this. Honestly, it sparked the joy. However, in a live stream with Swansea University, writer Russell T Davies had this to say about the series.
Huge clanging warning bells are ringing as the giants rise up, as the with Netflix and Disney Plus especially. I think that's a very great worry where, Loki makes one reference to being bisexual once and everyone's like, oh my God, it's like a pansexual show. It's like one word. He said the word prince. And we're all meant to go, thank you, Disney. Aren't you marvelous? It's pathetic. It's a ridiculous, craven, feeble gesture towards the vital politics and the stories that should be told. So they will damn us with their condescension in the end. So that's my worry now.
So who the hell is this Russell T Davies, this Welsh demon who dares to challenge our great and perfect bisexual representation, and what the hell does he know about writing bi characters? Davies rose to prominence as a writer in 1999 with the release of the original Queer as Folk, inspired by his own life as a young gay man, which was later adapted into a successful American series of the same name. You might know him better as the writer who revived Doctor Who with Christopher Eccleston and David Tennant's Doctors and created the spin-offs Torchwood and the Sarah Jane Adventures. But back in 1999 and 2000, Russell T Davies was a controversial figure. A lot of people weren't happy with Queer as Folk and its portrayals of gay men's lives. Both straight and gay audiences found it offensive, either because they were homophobic or because they feared portrayals of disreputable gay characters would incite further homophobia. There had never been a show like Queer as Folk before. Men weren't generally shown to be kissing on television in those days, and they certainly weren't the main characters of the shows. After 2 seasons of UK Queer as Folk, Davies moved on to a limited series called Bob and Rose, released in 2001. Bob Gossage is a school teacher and a gay man living in Manchester who spends a good amount of time on Canal Street attending the same clubs mentioned in the Manchester-based Queer as Folk. After an uncomfortable attempt at a hookup, Bob ends up on a street corner hailing a taxi at the same moment as a straight woman named Rose. Rose has had a bad night, having been harassed by her last taxi driver, and is wary of Bob at first, but they end up chatting, getting in touch and going on a date. Despite all his beliefs about himself and the nature of his sexuality, Bob is attracted to Rose. He loves her personality, she makes him laugh, and weirdest of all, she turns him on.
Oh.
He had no idea he could be turned on by a woman. And it seems to Bob that it isn't just any woman who can turn him on, it's only Rose. Rose is the exception to the rule. Bob is a gay man, indisputably. Nothing about his relationship to Rose changes this, and it certainly doesn't make him interested in other women. So whenever anyone suggests that Bob is bisexual, such as Rose or his mum, Bob denies it. He's not bi, he says he's gay. It's just that he's gay and he loves this one woman.
I thought that he was gay, so I didn't think...
I am gay.
So when it turns out that he's bisexual, it just started happening.
I'm not bisexual.
Bob, I was there.
Naturally, as with any work written by Russell T Davies, this show pissed people off. Homophobes won't enjoy this show, but gay people were also upset by this idea that a gay man can be straight if he finds the right woman. On top of that, bisexuals weren't too happy that Bob refused to identify as bi. But what a lot of people don't realise about this show is that it's inspired by a true story. A friend of Davies was a gay man who fell for a woman. I understand the controversy. I understand the fear of portraying our communities in the wrong light, in an unfavourable light. But these are real people's stories. I know people like Bob who are otherwise gay, but there's one person for them who is an exception to the rule. People tend to say that I make content about bisexuals, but I, to my mind, make content about bisexuality. And however you decide to label Bob, and whether you think this is a good or respectable portrayal of bisexuals, it is an authentic story of bisexuality and how it impacts real people's lives. Bob and Rose is first and foremost a love story, star-crossed lovers meeting by chance in the middle of the night, a one in a million moment. But it's also a story about identity. It takes Bob the full first episode to even admit to himself that he might be attracted to Rose, despite hiding the fact that he's gay from her and going on what is clearly a date with her. And even after that, he struggles with the idea and worries it might all be a fluke. When it all starts to seem like this relationship is for real, he realizes he will have to once again come out to all the people in his life, including his gay community. Bob's mum Monica is a gay rights activist. She may have struggled at first with Bob coming out, but ultimately she took up the fight more than Bob ever did. She runs a group for parents of gay people called PAH.
It's PAH, Parents Against Homophobia. Has he explained?
Not really, no.
It's a deliberate acronym. PAH. PAH. To all the idiots and all the fools, that's what we say.
So when Bob has to come out to her about dating Rose, surrounded by all this work, all her activism constantly, he just can't do it. He can't take back being gay after she has spent all these years fighting to make the world a better place for him to live in. Monica does say that it's fine, being bi still makes him part of the community, but it's obvious there's a slight disappointment. Bob also struggles with the pleasure his dad takes in Bob having a girlfriend rather than having a boyfriend. The next day, Monica is hosting a rally she's been organising for a long time, a protest against Section 28. For anyone who doesn't know, Section 28 referred to laws introduced by Margaret Thatcher's government to prohibit the promotion of homosexuality. Monica decides to step down as president of PAH. Her sense of purpose has been shaken by the news that Bob, whether he identifies as gay or not, has a girlfriend. Who is she in relation to this fight if not the mother of a gay man? How can a man be gay and have a girlfriend? That's a question both she and Bob are asking themselves. But when Monica sees a series of buses passing by, she's reminded that the bus company is owned by a homophobe who donates enormous sums of his profits to homophobic legislation. In this moment, she remembers that, regardless of her relationship to gay people, this fight is worth it, and has always been worth it. She directs the protesters to stop the bus and handcuffs herself to it so it can't move. This sequence was based on a real event, and the drag queen who stops the bus was the real-life drag queen who stopped the real-life bus.
You shall not pass!
This, in turn, inspires Bob to accept himself, to realise that he doesn't need to sacrifice any part of his identity to be with Rose. This isn't a fight for gay men, it's a fight against homophobia in the name of liberation and love. It's honestly one of the best episodes of television I've ever seen, and I don't care how Bob identifies, it will resonate with bisexuals everywhere, I'm sure of it.
He's a gay man with a straight girlfriend, and that's equality!
But also the very fact that this show can't be pinned down is part of what makes it so bisexual. That's our problem. That's the problem people have with us, that we cannot be pinned down. Bob and Rose was not what you'd call a massive success, but it was a really great series. It's only 6 episodes and I recommend it to everyone. A couple of years later, Davies was asked to revive Doctor Who, a 40-year-old franchise which had gone off the air in 1989. I'm a huge Doctor Who fan, and I say with love that it did get a little bit rubbish in the 80s, and it's probably for the best that it died, as much as I love the 7th Doctor and Ace. When Davies brought it back in 2005, it was in some ways completely unrecognisable, while in other ways being exactly the same as the show always was. The Doctor is an alien time traveller who can avoid death by changing his body. He had famously always appeared to be a more or less asexual character, often travelling with various hotties from all across time and space, but never so much as flirting or even making suggestive comments. I think this resonated not just with asexual fans, but also with gay fans. So, did Russell T Davies make the Doctor gay? No. No, definitely not. The Davies-era Doctors played by Christopher Eccleston and David Tennant were a little bit cheeky, a little bit flirtatious at times, but definitely not gay, and one of the Doctor's main storylines involves falling in love with a character named Rose. Sound familiar? But still, the relationship is never consummated. They don't kiss, or when they do kiss, it's only for magical sci-fi reasons, and they don't ever officially enter into any formal romantic relationship. If you still see the Doctor as asexual and aromantic, then he still is. Now, enter Jack. As Davies put it, I thought it's time to introduce bisexuals properly into mainstream television. Captain Jack Harkness was a character created by Davies to become a companion of the Doctor and his friend Rose. Jack was introduced in the Stephen Moffat two-parter beginning with The Empty Child. This story introduces Jack as a foil to the Doctor. They are in some ways the same character. The Doctor began as an exile from his home. So did Jack. Jack is a con artist, and the Doctor actually started out as a criminal himself in a lot of ways. They're now both time-travelling adventurers, with the main difference between them being that Jack doesn't travel through time to help others, he travels to help himself. And sexuality is not something Jack is shy about. In his time, the 51st century, the world isn't limited to just a few gender options anymore. The human race is out there in the whole wide universe with millions of other species to smooch. So Jack is not only bisexual, but culturally bisexual. And I guess this brings us back to identity for a moment, because people get really particular about this. In various media and interviews, Jack has been referred to as bisexual, omnisexual, and pansexual. When I use the term bisexual, I do it in the traditional sense of being all-encompassing of people who experience attraction bisexually, both gay and straight attractions, not as somehow limited by gender. Bisexual activists never use the word in a limiting way and still don't. And I often find in media when words like omnisexual and pansexual are used, they're not being used in the same sense that they're used in queer communities, where each label refers to a unique sexual orientation with a flag to make sure they are distinct and separate, and don't ever mislabel them as omnisexual because they're pansexual, and those are completely different things with totally different merchandise. Usually when you hear a character called pansexual, it refers to someone like Jack or Lando Calrissian. They mean he's pansexual in that he f***s aliens and robots, or sometimes they mean it in the Freudian sense, but they very, very rarely mean it in the sense of identity and flag waving. Jack never identifies with any sexual identity in Doctor Who or Torchwood. Jack doesn't even come from a culture in which it makes sense to have a sexual identity. But I will continue to use the word bi to refer to him in this video because it's the broadest, oldest umbrella term, and it best describes what made the character unique. Jack's not unique for fucking aliens. No one's referring to Captain Kirk as a queer icon, and he f***ed a lot of aliens. So back to Jack in Doctor Who. Jack was brought in as a foil to the Doctor. His sexuality is part of that. Where the Doctor doesn't seem to be interested sexually in anybody, Jack seems to be interested in everyone. Where the Doctor sees beauty in all species, no matter how different, well, so does Jack, if you know what I mean. There's definitely a case to be made for a bisexual, if also asexual Doctor, but Davies created Jack to be a swashbuckling, bisexy bad boy hero, specifically bringing bisexuality into the mainstream. And although he only appears in 5 episodes of Series 1 of Doctor Who, he clearly spends that time falling in love with both Rose and the Doctor, and I loved it. As an 18-year-old in 2005, only just coming out at the time, it meant a lot to me to see that on TV, and it meant a lot to see a bisexual on TV who wasn't actually evil as well. At the end of the first season of the revived Doctor Who, Jack left the show and made his next appearance in the Doctor Who spin-off, Torchwood, a sci-fi series targeting an older audience. In this show, Jack essentially filled the role of the Doctor, now much older, and like the Doctor having lived many lives and died many times. Torchwood follows a team of secret agents working under Jack in a city which receives a lot of alien visitors via a rift in time and space. Jack and his team work to protect the city and the peoples of Earth from various threats caused by the rift, all while looking sexy and stylish by 2006 standards, with plenty of snogging. The plan with Torchwood was always to make sexuality ambiguous. Everyone seems like they could be bisexual, and that is very intentional. Without making it political or dull, This is going to be a very bisexual program. I want to knock down the barriers so we can't define which of the characters is gay. We need to start mixing things up rather than thinking, this is a gay character and he'll only ever go off with men. In the first season, Jack kisses Gwen but hooks up with Yanto, and Yanto has an ex-girlfriend, and Tosh fancies Owen but hooks up with an alien woman. Everyone gets to kiss both a man and a woman in the first couple of seasons of Torchwood in some way or another. This is only 2006, remember. No TV was like this in 2006. This felt like a revolution at the time, to me anyway. Straight people on television was the norm, and then some characters were gay. The idea that a science fiction television show spun off from one of the most successful TV franchises of all time should have a canonically bi protagonist, along with potentially all other protagonists being bi. That's incredible. There's no queer baiting in Torchwood. You see Jack have sex with men, you see Toshiko hooking up with a woman. The characters talk about Jack's sexuality and try to figure out if he's gay or bi and what that means for them, all while the rest of them start to lose touch with what sexual identity means in the 21st century, and quite rightly so. When you live a Torchwood life, these quaint little categories don't really matter anymore. Your world is beyond gender, it's beyond species. It's beyond time. Jack has returned to Doctor Who many times since leaving, and almost every time they make a point of illustrating his bisexuality. It's inescapable.
Nice to meet you, Martha Jones.
Oh, don't start.
I was only saying hello.
Captain Jack Harkness, and who are you?
Stop it.
Captain Jack Harkness.
Stop it.
Can I say hello to anyone?
Chan, I do not protest, though.
I honestly believe that Jack and Torchwood changed the landscape of sexuality in science fiction. He is the archetypical magical hedonistic bisexual. The American CW show Legends of Tomorrow is clearly inspired in so many ways by Doctor Who and Torchwood, and you can see the influence of Jack Harkness on their interpretation of John Constantine. And I'm absolutely sure the sassy secret agent version of Loki from the comics would not exist without Captain Jack having swaggered his way onto television first. Naturally, Jack received some criticism for being a promiscuous bisexual because, of course, all portrayals of LGBT people are problematic if not as conservative as possible, but I like his promiscuity, and I think it makes sense for his character. Early on, it's part of his youth and his culture, and later it starts to represent his trying to escape loss over and over. His main love interest in the series, Yanto, is the opposite, really. Yanto is chronically monogamous and has a coming out scene in the third series which reflects Bob and Rose, in which he tells his sister, it's not men, he's not gay, it's just Jack.
It's not men, it's just him. It's only him.
There are going to be some big spoilers for Torchwood in the next 10 minutes or so, by the way, so be warned. Yanto Jones dies in Series 3 of Torchwood. It's shocking and tragic and honestly a beautifully sad moment and really great television. I want to talk about it because I remember the backlash the show received for Yanto's death being seen as homophobic because the straight couple survives. Firstly, death is a major theme in Torchwood. A few episodes prior, Toshiko and Owen died, who had their own straight romance storyline. In the very first episode of Torchwood, a character named Susie dies, and she dies again later too. This theme is about risk-taking. The Torchwood agents risk their lives every day, and it becomes quickly clear that it's not for the sake of being heroes. They love this job. They love the thrill of it. They love leaving behind the normal, conventional, boring world and becoming a part of the magic of Torchwood and the rift and time travel and aliens. This is also a theme in Russell T Davies' Doctor Who. Rose travels with the Doctor, but at what cost? Doctor Who is aimed at a younger audience, so there isn't a lot of death in the show, but their lifestyle is questioned. How can you keep this up? This can't last forever. And it doesn't. Spoiler alert, the Doctor loses Rose. It's all magical, spacey, wacy sci-fi, and technically she's not dead, but that's only because this is Doctor Who and not Torchwood. Rose is effectively dead. Donna is effectively dead. Living this lifestyle is fun and exciting and beautiful and sexy, but you make a choice to put yourself at risk. Let's rewind. 1999's Queer as Folk is the story of two best friends, Vince and Stuart. Stuart is sexy, swaggering, horny, and Vince is, well, Vince has a sizable Doctor Who VHS collection.
I bring Sutek's gift of death to all humanity.
He's a massive dork. There's a scene at the end of the second series where he compares running away with Stuart to flying away in Doctor Who's TARDIS.
I've been thinking about this for years. Press the button.
Dematerialise, step out, new planet.
Vince and Stuart have a friend named Phil who is killed when he has a bad reaction to taking drugs with a hookup. Obviously, Phil didn't die from HIV, but HIV is referenced at his funeral, and later Phil's mother asks Vince, if my son was straight, living a straight lifestyle, would he be dead right now? If he'd taken a woman home with him that night, would he be dead? It's a haunting question, though not really a prominent one. The boys get on with life and try not to dwell on losing Phil. Bob and Rose similarly doesn't dwell on HIV, but it's mentioned.
You don't see clones anymore, do you? They must have died out.
They did, yes.
Davies came of age in the 1980s. These days you hear a lot of, an entire generation of gay men was wiped out, they're all dead because of HIV. But they're not. Russell T Davies is part of that generation of gay men, and his experience comes through in his work. Losing those you love, the people around you, dying because they've chosen to live life authentically as a queer person. The question of whether gay and bi men should be allowed to die in Davies' work sounds to me like a question of whether the authentic worldview of a gay man who came of age in the 80s should be filtered through the worldview of younger people who've never experienced that. When I watch the original Queer as Folk, I see a lot of that energy, the excitement of the Doctor and Rose living their dangerous life together. I see Jack and Yanto and Gwen. I think that possibly on some level, Davies brings his experience as a gay man into these stories too. Yanto died in Jack's arms because Davies survived a time when that was happening all around him all the time. Another important series by Davies is Cucumber, which centres around a middle-aged gay man who did survive the 1980s, though he never really came to terms with being gay. It also stars a brilliant young bisexual character, Freddie, whose story involves coming to terms with sexual abuse at the hands of one of his teachers, and how this has informed his relationship to his own sexuality and those around him. And in fact, Cucumber wasn't a standalone, it was aired alongside a companion series which explored various LGBT characters from different walks of life, including probably the first time I ever saw a trans woman play a trans woman on British TV. But Cucumber continues this theme of loss of gay men. Again, it isn't about AIDS specifically, but it's about that risk, pushing yourself into situations which you know are dangerous, way too dangerous, a situation you might not even come out of alive, but you do it anyway. Why do you do it? Davies' most recent work, It's a Sin, tells the story of the lives of young gay men living and dying in the 1980s. It's a beautiful show and an important one which I think taught a lot of younger people about a world they never experienced. It's the culmination of all these themes and deaths and references to AIDS in all his other work. The central character, Richie, knows about AIDS, but he's in denial.
They say it affects homosexuals, patients, and haemophiliacs like there's a disease which has targeted the letter H.
He refuses to accept the reality of what's happening around him, and he keeps putting himself in dangerous situations, accepting the risk, denying the risk, ignoring the risk. There's a scene where he gets together with a group of other gay men to drink battery acid in hopes that it'll destroy the virus. These guys push and push and push. It seems so clear, looking back over 2 decades of Davies' work, that this theme, this time inspired by his young life, influenced so much of his writing. The Doctor and Rose pushing themselves, taking risks, Jack and Gwen and Yanto, everyone in Torchwood risking their lives until they die because they just can't stop. I can't speak for Davies, but as a huge fan of his work, these themes seem undeniably connected to me. So when Davies writes science fiction, when he takes an existing franchise and turns it into something new and special, he brings everything with it. The bisexuals, the risks, the death, the virus. There's an episode of Doctor Who where a virus is spread by touching, and the cure is touch. These themes seem so profoundly authentic, no matter how magical and spacey-wacy they get. Meanwhile, in 2021, 20 years after Davies started bringing all these bisexual characters into mainstream British television, after 25 Marvel Cinematic Universe films and dozens of TV spin-offs, Marvel Studios, owned by, of course, Disney, had the bravery to portray this.
A bit of both.
Oh, so brave. Brings a tear to my eye, honestly. No, but seriously, executive producer Kate Herron made a point of saying that it was really important to bring that to the character. And in some ways, it's a massive scene. It's a huge step. And I think Kate Herron did that with the absolute best of intentions, and I don't fault her. But it's only huge and massive and important in the context of a really lazy franchise which just doesn't give a crap. Loki in the comics is famous for being gender fluid, which means both a male version of him and a female version of him are the authentic versions of him, and he switches back and forth between them. And that's awesome, that is so great, and not at all how the TV series portrays it. The other version of Loki in the show, the female version of Loki who he falls in love with, is just a separate person. She doesn't even have the same hair colour. It's not the same idea of this being the same person with two versions of the same body. Loki doesn't turn into her and she doesn't turn into him because they're just two separate characters. In fact, the comic book version of her, Enchantress, is literally just a separate character. The idea that these Lokis aren't really the same person is further illustrated by the fact that there's a black Loki and a crocodile Loki. They're not all the same Loki. What I'm getting at is there are a ton of ways in which this other version of Loki whom he falls in love with could have been another male Loki. Why didn't he fall in love with the black Loki? I'll give you two guesses. In the comics, when Loki discusses sexual fluidity, he says that in Asgard they don't have the same ideas of sexual orientation as we do. They're more open-minded about it. So why would the Lokis even feel the need to talk about something which should really have been entirely normal to them? Like with Captain Jack in Doctor Who, he comes from a culture which is bisexual, where it wouldn't occur to him to be limited by gender in attraction. Loki is an alien god. It makes sense that his culture would have different ideas of sexuality. I think often producers are working with the best of intentions, but if your work is part of a massive media empire owned by various powerful conservative people with a pure profit motive, there will always be limitations to what is possible. Marvel has repeatedly avoided LGBT content in its films. Everyone has been so excited that Valkyrie is bi for years now, but I don't think anything has actually happened in any of the movies to suggest that. When the film Avengers Endgame reported that they'd finally have a gay character, it was a small invented role named Grieving Man, which the apparently straight director played himself. Which, if I can just sidetrack for a moment, directors making cameos in their own films is just so vain, and this was clearly about sucking his own dick here. Gay actors struggle immensely to get roles in Hollywood, and Dickhead here was like, look everyone, I can be a gay too. Fuck off, you got paid millions to direct this movie. Just give the role to a struggling actor. The Marvel TV series have been slightly better with representation than the films, such as with Runaways' representation of bisexuality, though another series that was in development a few years ago, The New Warriors, according to an executive producer on the show, it wasn't picked up because of the prominent LGBT storylines in the plot. I don't know how to bring this up because I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, I don't want to stir up drama, but Disney's not your friend. I know it feels that way sometimes, but it's not. It's a massive media corporation, one of the most powerful in the world, one of the most influential and daunting powers in film and television. It's not here to help you. Gestures of LGBT inclusiveness are not done out of the kindness of a corporation's heart. It may be that Kate Herron did it out of compassion and love for the community, but that's not why Disney allowed it. Disney allowed it because A, it gets loads of press coverage and brings in new viewers, and B, because they can cut it out when they sell the show overseas to less accepting territories. Torchwood and Doctor Who were produced by the BBC, which means they were funded by TV licenses. TV license is a sort of TV tax. We get public television because we pay for it, and this means it doesn't come with certain pressures, such as pressures from advertisers. Here on YouTube, I'm subject to pressures from advertisers to censor my work and provide a slightly narrower body of work than I might otherwise. The BBC doesn't have to worry about that, nor does it have to worry about selling overseas, because the work isn't made for overseas sales. There are definitely problems with the BBC. It's not a perfect system, but there are definitely major benefits to it as well. Cucumber, Queer as Folk, and It's a Sin were produced by Channel 4, which does have to worry about advertisers, but the channel was created specifically with the intention of catering to minority groups, people who are underrepresented on other channels. So as a result, we have many of these amazing shows by Davies. Meanwhile, Disney is building a terrifying monopoly on the film industry. And in terms of artistic integrity, Disney is churning out crappy remakes of its old films and developing soulless Marvel films in cooperation with the US military. It's just not very good content. It's expensive though. And since they own the intellectual property to our favourite superheroes, we'll keep on paying for that soulless crap. And Honestly, Loki was not that good. Marvel and Disney will dish out diversity as long as it's extremely profitable, and if you really want to suck Disney's dick because they allowed a producer to drop in a line that implies something a little bit bisexual, then by all means suck away. But I agree with Russell T Davies when he says we have to be careful here. This is a powerful company dropping crumbs for us, and we're expected to be delighted about it. But they're not doing it for us. They're just not. I received a comment on my last video talking about how this person watched the whole episode of Loki with their parents, who completely missed the bi reference and didn't even follow it after it was explained to them, leaving this person to wonder if this even happened. If queer people are picking up on it but straight people aren't, that's the gay button. That's queer baiting. Disney and Marvel Studios don't really have a commitment to LGBT rights. Their whole shtick is to create sufficiently apolitical content that you don't feel offended, whoever you are. In the meantime, the media now has an annual tradition of announcing the first LGBT Disney character over and over because they keep dropping more breadcrumbs, and we lap them up because we're starved and give them all the free publicity they want for it. Meanwhile, they're able to excise any explicit content and sell the content in territories which would otherwise censor the film. Do they really have any motivation to change that pattern? Part 2. Commodifying validation. To be monosexual, that is to be lesbian, gay or straight, the sexuality you identify with can be quite easy to reaffirm. When you're a straight woman and you kiss a man, that reaffirms your heterosexuality. You don't even have to think about it. When you're a gay man and you tell your mum you've got a boyfriend, that reaffirms your gayness. It's a default element to being straight or gay that your sexual attraction is reaffirmed by your sexual and romantic behaviour. But if you are in any way bisexual, things like kissing a person or having a partner are never enough to prove to the world, this doesn't make me straight or gay, this is a part of a bisexual attraction. Bob appears to be straight, but he never was, and he never will be. He and Rose can get married, be monogamous, have kids, he still won't be straight. Though it will look that way to some people, while to others it will look like he's a gay man in denial. My primary relationship for the last several years has been with a woman. How should anyone even know I'm attracted to men? Does it even matter? Why do I feel the need to be out? It's a pretty big question. Why bother identifying with your bisexuality when, unless you're in the middle of a three-way, does it even matter? If you're bi, take a moment to think about that. Why does it matter? Who cares? Why do you need anyone to know? Well, there are a ton of reasons why that might be important for someone. For example, if you're in a room full of straight people and they're all assuming you're straight, well, straight people often talk a little bit differently when they assume that there are no queer people around. You might also want to be open about your bisexuality so you can avoid accusations of lying. When people see monosexuality as the default, being anything other than explicitly out can lead to accusations of deceit. You might want to be open about your bisexuality because you're struggling with internalized homophobia and internalized biphobia, and to deal with that alone and to be silent about it just builds shame. To be out and open about it builds pride. It makes you feel free. There are a ton of reasons why we want to be out about our bisexuality, and I encourage you to share yours in the comments. But we often don't feel validated in our sexualities precisely because monosexuality is the standard. You might find when you come out, people question your preference, try to get you to admit that you're more gay or more straight so they can fit you into their tidy little boxes. So it can feel incredibly invalidating to come out at all. It can often feel very lonely, like you're one person with no backup. And that's why you may have seen floating around the internet 500 million posts saying, hey, you are valid. You're so fucking valid right now. You're so valid. You're so fucking valid, baby. You're so fucking valid right now. You understand? You're so fucking valid. And there's all sorts of bi content out there designed specifically to help you feel validated, to help you feel like you have a real valid movement behind you. Check out this list of bi movies, all the best bi actors, 500 different flags to choose from, bi musicians. Read this book and watch Disney's Loki because the representation is good. Good quality representation for sale. There's a commodification of bi-validation, bisexuality for purchase. And I'm not saying that's not okay. Enjoy your bisexual mug and watch Legends of Tomorrow for sure. And it's not necessarily unique to bisexuality, but it is interesting that so much of how we find validation comes from commodity. and in ways which you probably don't realise, and we'll get back to that in a moment. Is bisexuality more vulnerable to commodification because bisexuality is harder to prove, and bisexuals tend to feel less secure in their sexual orientation? Also, bisexuals lack access to bi-specific communities. There's not a lot of good, accessible theory in politics. Bisexual culture is just so hard to visualise, to illustrate, and possibly doesn't even really exist. I know a few years ago there was a huge drama on Twitter about whether bisexual culture really exists, and a number of bi activists insisted that yes, it exists, we're valid, but it really doesn't exist in the same way straight and gay culture does. It's very different, very intangible, very entwined with gay and straight cultures. The youths online have developed their own bisexual memes in lieu of culture. If you check out Reddit or TikTok, you'll learn about bi fashions, cuffing your jeans. Bisexuals do finger guns and like lemon bars and can't sit on chairs properly. TikTok has all kinds of slang specifically revolving around a song about sweaters, which if you listen to the lyrics, really is pretty straight, but there's a few lines which kind of sound like they could be poly and bi, so the young'uns have latched on. It reminds me of a few years ago with the Panic at the Disco song Girls, Girls, Boys. It's now considered to be a bisexual anthem, but if you listen to it, it's kind of biphobic. Brendan Urie said in interviews that it's about bar-sexual girls who become bisexual when they're drunk.
We both are familiar with girls that love girls and boys. Maybe not bisexual, but they have the term bar-sexual, where girls will just, kiss in bars when you have a few too many. And that, for whatever reason, was just like a sexy idea. We're like, that's really cool.
He has since said that since the community has decided that it was a bi-positive song, then that's what it means now. But it's really fascinating to me that as bisexuals, we're so desperate to see ourselves reflected in culture, in music, in media, that we just decide that something's bisexual and make it our anthem. But besides all that, some of these memes are cute and fun, and I like that we have our own memes, even if they're only understood by compulsively online bisexuals. But I think it's also important to keep in mind that TikTok is funded by ads. The community which you build on TikTok is product. As with all social media, the content you produce is in fact a product, which is used by the company to sell ads while they mine your data, they steal your information. Have you ever opened up Facebook to see the post on your timeline saying, "We at Facebook care about you and your memories, so take a look at this one and share it." Babes, they're telling you that you need to produce more content, and here's some easy automated content for you. Same with those cute little videos about how you and so-and-so have been friends for 10 years, whatever. You are their unpaid content creators. And it's not just content about validity, it's also this unhealthy fighting people do on Twitter and Tumblr and wherever. You see people who are triggered as hell, they're not okay, fighting to the death like it's a real life battleground. Queer people who need support, and here they are, making their lives worse and worse, and all it does is produce more content for the site which needs your content so they can make money. Your pain funds Twitter. And actually, if you look at the original video in which Davies talked about Loki, it only has a few hundred views. No one watched it, but media outlets knew that it would be great clickbait, and thousands of people angrily responded to Facebook and Twitter shares of these articles without watching the original video at all. But they knew you wouldn't watch the video. They knew you'd just engage with the post, and that's all they care about. And then I used the same quote in my video for my thumbnail, because that's all I care about too.
Smash that like button, my dears.
Whether you're on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, Twitter, these are all services which require you to produce content for free to keep users on the site so they'll view the ads. So once again, bisexuality is valid. You're valid. You're so fucking valid. That's commodified. It becomes a product. And let's be honest, I am also selling you this content. I'd rather sell it via just Patreon support. I'd rather just do activism for free. I spent most of my adult life broke as heck and trying to do activism while struggling to pay rent. And if there was some kind of universal basic income which allowed me to commit to that, I'd probably still be doing it. But for now, YouTube is a significant supporter of my work through ads like this. Boo! YouTube just sold buy validation through my work. And I actually kind of have to have these ads on here. While YouTube has suggested that its algorithm doesn't prioritize monetized channels, I don't think that's most YouTubers' experience. Some of my most popular videos went relatively unnoticed by the algorithm until the first week I was monetized, and suddenly, out of nowhere, all these months-old videos became incredibly popular, just totally by coincidence. And videos that I've left unmonetized still have very few views. So to bring you this kind of content at all, we're kind of stuck in this system. Now, I'm just a humble video maker, and honestly, without this channel, I would be completely screwed. But it's important to keep in mind what this is. What is happening here? I don't know if there are really any alternatives available at this point when it comes to selling by validation. There have been attempts to create ethical social media alternatives, and there are plenty of attempts to produce independent forms of representation. I think and hope that there has to be a non-profit, ethically produced social media alternative, because social media is such an important tool and powerful technology which can be used for good, but the good shouldn't be at a literal price. I work with non-profit LGBT organizations, and we have to use social media because there's such a monopoly on this technology. We need to reach people. But to reach people, we create content for the platform, and then they mine our data and sell ads on our work. And look at pride parades. In a lot of countries, pride has been co-opted by businesses looking to advertise. Go to London Pride, it's just a big commercial. Businesses know that the gays and the liberals have spending power, and they're delighted to sell you their inclusion. Depending on where you live, you might feel like there's no other way to do Pride that isn't corporate sponsored. Here in Ljubljana, it's not. We all march together, no one stands on the sidelines, there's no ads, no businesses. It's a protest. The revolution should not be for sale. And assimilation into this system doesn't mean we've won. It means they've figured out how to monetize our rebellion. So what do? Boycott all this? Watching small indie films probably is not going to encourage Disney to start giving more of a crap about sexual or gender minorities. At the moment, the system is based around voting with your dollar, and corporations like Disney and Facebook aren't going to suffer in any significant ways if we just give up and go read a book. We have to keep an eye on these guys. And yes, as Russell T Davies said, it should set off huge clanging alarm bells that Disney is repeatedly getting so much credit for doing so little. How pathetically small we must seem to them. There was definitely a time when cheeky hints and nods toward queer attraction was rightly celebrated, but we are well past that time. It's well past time to get a shovel, dig up Walt Disney, and grab him by his crusty mummified balls and be like, bro, make it gayer. Oh, okay, apparently he was cremated, so we can't do that. So capitalism wins again. Content-based validation isn't inherently bad. Going back to some of those Russell T Davies shows, I think they do way more good than harm, and in a capitalist world where there really is no other option, watching a BBC show about bisexual superheroes is definitely not the worst way to be validated. If you're seeking validation in your sexuality, Disney is not really the place to go, and it's probably far healthier for you to seek out real-life community. I probably sound like a broken record at this point, but if you can find or create local offline community, that can be so validating. Sitting in a non-profit youth centre with a dozen bisexuals chatting about all these issues is a beautiful and amazing feeling which can never be truly reproduced for profit. I've never even seen a group of normal bisexual characters just together in fiction for a bi hangout. That part of many people's realities is just not televised. Some people were really excited about Loki's bisexuality, but Loki will seem great, but only if that's all you've ever seen. If you're used to greedy corporations giving you crumbs, you'll think crumbs are incredible. But if you've seen Russell T Davies' work, if you've seen actual meaningful portrayals of bisexuality, Loki will seem, well,
feeble
and
craven.
Same way, if you've ever experienced a bisexual TikTok and Instagram, you'll feel empowered by it, but if you've ever sat in a room with 10 or 20 other bisexuals, TikTok and Instagram will fall completely flat. We can do better, but we have to first realize we can do better. We have to raise our standards and demand better for ourselves. because bisexuals and bisexuality deserve more. And this is not just about sold validation being bad because it's making evil corporations money. It's also bad because it's not enough. Real liberation can never be sold to you. They're just tricking you because you think you can't do better. And let's be honest, bisexuals have this tendency of thinking we don't deserve anything, so we're happy with anything we can get. We don't think we deserve or need as much as gay people, and we're used to getting shit from all sides, so we feel like we should be grateful for any positive attention, but this way, things never change. I got really carried away with the bread tube energy in this video, didn't I? The point is, Loki did a shit job. Russell T Davies has done more for bisexuality and the movement towards our liberation than anything Disney has ever dreamed of doing. So when Daddy Davis says watch out, you listen. You've heard the alarm bells. What happens now? For the time being, this is how media is made. And whatever happens next, defending Disney and Marvel Studios should be at the bottom of anyone's list of fighting for good LGBT representation. They want our money, they need to earn it. And if they truly support our liberation, then it's time to stop spoon-feeding queer content to conservatives. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy my videos and want to support this channel, please consider becoming a patron. Speaking of whomst, special thanks to Kat R, Danny Aidenstone, Metheta, Siobhan, Tasha Heim, The Bipan Library, Aaron, AJ, Amelia D, Apathetic Gaiety, Eric Parkinson, B, Beslav, Beth Hershey, Bipartisan, Charis Edwards, Dweebin, ES, Erie Enby, Emery James Fairgrieve, Fafa Elania, Felixer of Life, Gavin Salmon, Hackneyed Edits, Jessage, Juicy Fantasy Queen Plant Hookups, Juliana C, Julius, Kale, Kate and Jess, Kisa, Lacey Cox, Lillian Brink, Lord Asriel, Marla, Miss Mad, Miriam McGlynn, Nico, Nick Snary, Nina, Oddbjorn the Frizzy, Olive, Peach, Pregnant Seinfeld, Rebecca Peacock, Renderly, River Haddock, Rock the Shell, Ryan Peters, St. Laura, Samson Lopez, Sarah R, Savrad Musin, Sawyer Donk, Shaved Headed By, Sithvich, Soy, Spaghetti Rabbit, Steve, Straw Fox, Susie S, Svipol the Trans Boy Valkyrie, The Children of Jack Acid, Tia Till, Tina Gigya, Troy Zayer, Verlux, Vince Whitaker, and Will O'Connor. Thank you everyone. Thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting me. I love you. Russell T Davies is taking over Doctor Who again. Russell T Davies is taking over Doctor Who again, and I read his novelization of Rose, his first Doctor Who story recently, and in it he gives a hint at what the next Doctor after Jodie Whittaker would be in his mind anyway, and I think this is before he knew he was taking over the show again. So like, if you want to have like a preview into what he thinks the next Doctor should look like and the Doctor after that, then read Rose. Also, I met him once and he was really nice. He was really sweet. He was very humble. He was a lovely person. Okay, anyway, bye. You're so fucking valid.